Good afternoon. I'm Counselor Dee Knutson, and I would like to call our weekly informational to order, and thank you all for being with us. We have a very special treat to just kick off our informational today, to just share a little bit more information about the annual event that will take place again this Saturday, May 3rd, and it is Cinco de Mayo. And I would like to encourage everyone out there listening to attend this wonderful fiesta. Which again, as I said before, this is not the first year for it, but every year it gets bigger and better. And I would like to Sister Janet to come forward with some special musicians who are just going to play a couple minutes of music with us. So why don't you all go forward, and Janet, you go ahead and start speaking and introduce yourself for the audience.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having us this afternoon. I'm Sister Janet Horseman. I'm a presentation sister, and I work in our Hispanic ministry Caminando Juntos here in Sioux Falls. As Dee said, this will be the second annual Cinco de Mayo celebration in Sioux Falls. And before I share a little bit of information about that, I'd like to introduce these three gentlemen from the Sioux Falls Mariachi, or Mariachi Sioux Falls, Elmer Oriana and Mark Johnson and Salvador Sanchez, and they're going to treat you to a little bit of the flavor of Cinco de Mayo.
México, lindo y querido, si muero lejos de ti, que digan que estoy dormido y que me traigan aquí, que digan que estoy dormido y que me traigan aquí. México lindo y querido, si muero lejos de ti. Voz de la guitarra mía, al despertar la mañana, vengo a cantar su alegría de mi tierra mexicana, yo le canto a sus volcanes, a sus montañas y ríos, que son como talismanes, es cuna de hombres cabales, al pie de los magueyales, y que me traigan, señores, al amor de mis amores. México lindo y querido, si muero lejos de ti, que estoy dormido y que me traigan aquí, que digan que estoy dormido y que me traigan aquí. México lindo y querido, si muero
When was the last time you had that at your council meeting? I'd like to just share a little bit of information about the celebration this year. It's being sponsored by Wells Fargo Bank as the presenting sponsor, and the event will be held this Saturday on May 3rd. beginning at 1 o'clock. The parade will start on the corner of 6th and Phillips and proceed to Falls Park. And in the park, there will be typical food from Mexico and Central America. We have like about 3 or 4 different musical groups that will be playing throughout the day. The Sioux Falls Mariachi group will be strolling through the park and giving you some more music from Mexico. And in addition to that, we'll have piñatas for the children, and we hope that it will just be a great celebration on Saturday, May 3rd. We'd love to have you there. Dee said that she put some informational sheets in your mailboxes, and so you'll have that information. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Janet, and thank you, musicians, for sharing your wonderful talent with us. That was great fun. I wish we could do that more often. And also, as I mentioned last week, there will also be some special events in collaboration with Cinco de Mayo at the zoo on Saturday also. So you might want to try to take in both if you can. And I'm hoping we won't have too much snow that particular day. Anyway, moving right ahead, I know we have lots on our agenda yet for today. We will next go to our regular City Council report from Deborah Owen, please.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Sioux Falls City Council. Just a couple of things to remind you of. Next week, there'll be a 3 o'clock, next week we'll have the fiscal committee meeting at 5, but, 5:15. There's also be an audit committee that will precede that in between the informational and the fiscal committee meeting. And then, in addition, on the 12th of May, there'll be the 3 o'clock Public Services Committee to make room for the, we call it kind of the changing of the guard dinner, but the outgoing council members are honored, and then, of course, the incoming are welcomed. So we'll have orientation to the council earlier that day, and then that dinner on the 12th. And the swearing-in ceremony is on May 19th at 11 o'clock. Thank you.
Deborah, thank you. And at this point, we're going to go ahead and take an item from the mayor's, even though he's not here quite yet, regarding just the, I'd like to call John Lose forward, please, the Director of Operations from the Washington Pavilion. And I believe one of the board members, maybe present now, is Sandra Pay. And I'd like them both to come forward and just, they have asked to just speak with us just for a couple minutes on the window situation at the pavilion. And thank you both for being here.
I guess we could say, well, first let me say that I'm Sandra Pay, Chair of the Board of Trustees at the Pavilion, and I live at 1900 South 1st. And I'd like to say that we are sorry that we have to be here, but we are also glad that we can be here today to talk to you and answer questions about the miscalculation that the Washington Pavilion made in the estimate that was submitted for the window replacement project at the pavilion. The careless oversight on our part was discovered early this year, and John Lose, our Director of Operations, reported the error to the Board of Trustees at their February meeting. And I want to assure you that at no time was any attempt ever made to try and sweep this under the rug. John told us that the city had been notified of the error, and a small group of trustees met with John at that time to talk about what had happened and what the options might be for going forward. And soon after, we established a committee headed by Richard Vandemark, one of our trustees, to work with John on an ongoing basis on the capital improvement figures. And at this point, I'd like to say that John has been working for the pavilion since it opened, and that we have a great deal of confidence in the work that John does. We are truly sorry for this error and any embarrassment or chagrin that it has caused the mayor or any member of the city council. We certainly wish that it had not happened, but there is a positive side to this, actually, because it shows that the city capital improvement process works. This was caught very early, so early, in fact, that there was no money spent. And I don't know where the Argus leader got the information that they had to write their editorial on Friday demanding that we return the money to the city. This was in the estimate stage. We didn't even have a final bid. No money was spent, so there isn't any money to return. And to talk about what happened and the process and the money, I am going to turn it over to John Lose.
Hello, Council. My name is John Lose. I'm the Director of Operations for the Washington Pavilion. I'm here today to accept the blame for the error and miscalculation in the estimate that I put forth to the City Council and the City back in 2005 for the windows to be added to the 2006 through 2009 plan. I was made aware that I had made this error when I was sitting at a meeting with Architecture Incorporated on February 8th of this year. We had a preliminary meeting to go over to start doing the design and engineering process of that. And during that meeting with Arc Inc. and McDonald and Mack Associates and some officials from the city, Arc Inc. made a statement at that point that said, you've got enough money budgeted for the windows, but I don't think there's enough money here to install them. So at that time I found out that I had made an error and went back and checked my work, and that's where the error was. I, for some reason, left off the installation costs of the windows. After that meeting, I left that meeting and asked Arc Inc. to review the figures again, and that we would meet again after I spoke with some representatives from the pavilion and some representatives from the city. I left that meeting and spoke with some city officials and brought them up to speed on what had taken place. And then I informed the Board of Trustees, and we spoke about it on their February 19th meeting. I made a recommendation that if they'd like, we could move forward with the project still and just do the project in phases. There's approximately 222 openings in the building that was identified in the project. The money allocated right now would allow us to complete approximately 100 of those openings. And then we could go back to the city or back to the capital improvement process and try to put in money in 2009 to 2013 plan to pick up the rest of the windows. Everyone agreed that was the proper recourse, and that's the recourse we've been following right now. I have had meetings with the city on February 22nd, February 28th, and the most recent one that you brought the minutes up from on on March 31st to walk through the city's capital improvement process. Currently, we are still in the design and engineering phase of the overall process of putting windows in the building. As Sandra stated and has been stated before, no money has been spent on windows. The only money that has been spent at this time is a contract with Architecture Incorporated and McDonald and Mack Associates to do design engineering work. The current plan is to bid phase one of that project sometime this summer and to install windows if the project moves forward sometime in late August to early September with completion by the end of the year. And as Sandra stated, I've worked for the pavilion for 9+ years, and I have to say this is probably the first major error I've made on any project done with the city or at the pavilion. And I am duly sorry for that error in judgment I've made, but I'm sorry it does happen. I will do my best to ensure it doesn't happen again, but mistakes are human, and I'm human. So I'll entertain any questions you have about the project.
Councilor Jameson?
Let me just,
Okay.
if I could just close, because I did want to say that we know how important the Washington Pavilion is to this city, economically, architecturally, and really emotionally. And we want to assure you that our contract with the city is more than a contract. It is really sacred trust with the people of the city to run the pavilion as well as we can. And we were here in February to tell you how hard we have worked this year to try and do that. And as John said, can we guarantee that we will never make another mistake? No. It's human nature to make mistakes occasionally. But we do really feel that with this new oversight structure that we have, that our approach in the future for CIP requests will be as well thought of and as accurate as we can possibly make them. And we do thank you for having us here today to at least address this issue. And as John said, we're happy to answer questions.
And Councilor Jameson.
Well, I think one of the frustrations that the council is experiencing is that if this was reported to the administration in February and we didn't find out about it until mid-April, there's a breakdown of communications there that should not have occurred, and that's something that I think is wrong. We should have been notified immediately that there was a problem, and it shouldn't have. And that's not your responsibility. That's somebody in the administration's responsibility to have let us know that there's a problem with the windows. And so I take some issue with them as much as I take blame some fault on you. So I want you to understand that. Thank you.
Councilor Stagers.
Yes, I have a number of questions. John, first of all, when you got the estimates for the windows, did you ever have any estimates for actually installing them?
For history's sake, sir, the windows have been in this CIP projects numerous times. The first time I did have installation numbers at that time, and the number was much greater.
Was that about 900,000?
It was closer to, the original estimate was actually closer to 650,000, and I believe that was a that was a number, actually 670, 116. That was actually entered into the 2003 capital improvement plan.
How much was that again?
670,116.
Okay. And so, what happened? Do you think about?
It was a
How
flat,
did they get
it was a
out?
flat mistake on my part, sir. When the windows were removed from the plan back in, I believe it was, 2004. At some point that we were talking about that. Because they do not show up in the 2005 to 2009 plan. Mm-hmm. So at some point in August 2004, they were removed, I believe, by council, and then we'd actually asked for the windows to get put back into that plan in the 2006 to 2010 plan, and at that point I received a new estimate, and that's where I made the error and didn't include the installation cost.
And this was from Pella, is that right?
The estimated that I put forward this time was from Pella, correct.
Okay.
And I give Pella credit, it does not say installation on it.
Okay. Also, you mentioned that if you would go ahead and spend the approximately $600,000, you would be able to take
583, yes.
Yep, about 600,000. That you would only be able to do about 50% of the windows. Is that right? Did I hear you correctly? You'd be able to do 100 openings of the 222.
Correct, sir, but many of those openings, there's 222 openings, but in those openings, sometimes there's two windows put in those openings, because the opening is only the penetration of the building. So there's actually some cases there's more than one window put in those locations. We're able to complete approximately 100 openings, but we won't be able to answer that question completely, sir, until there's actually bid numbers submitted by people willing to do the work. It might be more, it might be slightly less.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, because I was thinking that with the money that we've already, the city's already authorized, that would take care of maybe about 2/3 instead of 50%.
Well, there's approximately $530-some thousand left because the city has issued a contract to ARC Inc. and McDonald and Mack to do the design and engineering work, which was approximately $50,000. So there's $530,000 left to do the work.
Okay.
So we might be able to, when the bid numbers come in, we might be able to complete 2/3 of the windows themselves, but that will not be, that'll be greater than, that'll be probably about 50% of the openings.
Then also you mentioned ARC Inc. and paying them around $50,000. Was that part of the original number?
Design engineering is part of the original number, sir, yes.
So the number that we had, approximately almost $600,000, included the windows themselves plus the design and engineering. Is that right?
That's how the capital improvement plan is laid out. There's so much for the project and so much for design and engineering, correct?
Okay. And then also, too, I read someplace, probably it was the Argus, but I can't remember, that this $300,000, where we're short, that the pavilion would make that up.
Sir, it's the city's building. It's not the pavilion's building.
You know, that's the reason I'm wondering about this, because...
That was not a statement made by the pavilion or pavilion management, sir.
Okay, I'm going to have to look and see where I found this $300,000, but because I was asked this question by a reporter, and I said, I was saying, hey, that's great if the pavilion does make it up with fundraising or whatever, but the pavilion never officially said anything about making up the $300,000.
No, sir.
Okay, and then also, yeah, you mentioned that on February 8th is the first time that city officials learned of this.
Correct. At the meeting at Architects Inc.
Who was present at the meeting?
There was somebody from the planning staff.
Do you remember who it was?
It was either Rod Harms or Rick Bandy. I'm not sure which one. I'm still looking for my meeting notes.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, John.
Councilor Litz?
Thanks for coming down here today, folks. A mistake's been made, but, that's something we got to put behind us and move forward in a positive fashion from here on out, because grumbling about it and grousing about it doesn't put windows in the pavilion. I was curious about the design and engineering. You're replacing windows. Is there historical something that we have to be concerned about with the design factor on this?
That's why McDonald and Mack out of Minneapolis is brought on the board. They are actually historians. That was brought on. The window has between 6 and 8 different phases of windows that were put in the building. We're trying to be historically accurate as possible in replacing the look of the windows.
Very good. Okay, John, I was wondering, Pella's provided the windows for a lot of the other ones. Have you gotten bids from other window companies as well, or are you going to?
Arc Inc. has received some estimates from other vendors also.
Very good. And then my last question is incidentals. When you put windows in, you need insulation, you need sealants, you need stop, trim, that sort of things. Are they going to be included in the price of the labor, or will that be, usually those aren't provided for by the window company?
That is correct, sir. And the information that I was provided by ARC Inc., right now they are stating that it's $800,000 is what the total amount that they're estimating to install and provide the windows in the building right now. They are estimating $230,000 of that to be installation costs.
Okay, that's installation. We're talking labor, renting a machine, all that sort of thing.
Labor, if they decide to do a lift, if they decide to scaffold, how they decide to actually install the windows. That's involved in that $230,000 number.
Okay, so that will get the window installed, actually installed and sealed up is what I was
That's correct, sir.
Very good. Okay, John, thanks for coming down here and having the courage to face us down here, and I hope this thing proceeds in a positive fashion from here on out.
Thank you, sir.
Councilor Kavanaugh?
Thanks for being here, John. I didn't catch the names of the two people that you thought were at this February 8th meeting. Could you repeat those?
It was either Rick Bandy or Rod Harms. We work with both those project managers from the city.
Thank you.
Councilor Costello?
John, you had indicated, essentially in the original Pella bid, you just assumed that it had the labor in it, and it did not. Was that?
I missed that step, yes, sir.
The thought process to go forward with replacing a portion of the windows versus waiting and getting the appropriation to do the whole, all of them at one time. I'm wondering on the cost side of things, are we better off waiting and getting one bid or having to do it in 2 different phases?
I actually believe, sir, this was put forth on the CIP plan as 3 separate phases when it was originally put forth, and I believe it was council action last year that combined the window projects together. One of the reasons we like to phase projects is it allows us to get an actual bid number and lock that bid number down so we can move forward with the project. If we do it in 2 phases like we're recommending now, we will get a bid number and we'll have a hard cost, and all we have to do is provide some type of COLA adjustment to that number to know what the number for 2009 is going to be.
Okay.
Councillor Staggers?
Yes, John, you mentioned about, we had a consultant from Minneapolis to take a look at the historical aspect of this. I guess I'm wondering why that's the case, because we already have the windows on the east side. Aren't those already historical? In other words, what could they provide that we already don't know?
Those windows are actually not historical in certain aspects, sir.
What aspects aren't they?
The combination of the bottom panel and the top panel. In history, some of those panels were actually broken up where the bottom panel should actually be divided into two separate panels. The top panel can either be broken up into 4 panels, 6 panels, or 8 panels, depending on when they were installed in the building.
So
we're trying to be historically accurate when we move forward. We're not going to be able to be historically perfect, because only history can do that.
So, yes. Yeah, I know quite a bit about history is very, very imperfect and constantly fluid and changing and so forth, the interpretation of it and the way people view it. But I guess I'm a little concerned now. In the future, we're not going to be asked to replace these windows on the east side because they are not really historically accurate.
No, sir. No, sir. The pavilion's stance all along has been the reason that the pavilion would like to see the windows replaced is for economical reasons.
Well, I guess I beg to differ, because I remember when we first started talking about this in 2002. This was a special project of Steve Metley. He wanted historically accurate windows in the pavilion. And then after a number of years, then, well, that didn't seem to be such a strong argument. Then we start going for the economics of it. Now, as far as the economics, the latest I heard is that if we replace all these windows, we'll get a payback in 20 years. And that's not a very good time period. I mean, it's so long, far out. I mean, most businesses wouldn't even think in those terms. Now, with the additional money that we're going to have to spend, what's going to be the payback period, 25, 30 years? Do we know?
I haven't figured the payback, sir, but the last information I provided to you was an ROI of approximately $19,000 a year savings, and that was off of numbers provided in 2005, and I believe energy costs have risen considerably from that point. So I haven't had a new cost analysis done on that project yet.
Yeah, because this is so critical to have a cost-benefit analysis here to see if this is really worth doing.
Councillor Litz?
There is one other factor that enters into here, and that is that some of the wood panels that are in that building have probably seen their useful life, and we are going to be replacing them in the very least, which labor, materials are probably going to add up to what a third of the window would be anyway. So my assertion would be that, you know, sooner or later we replace it with wood, or we can eat it and replace it with windows. Those panels are going to need replaced, or they're going to be leaking into or the elements will be leaking into the building soon.
Would there be Councillor Kavanaugh? Sorry. Okay. Councillor Staggers?
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering here why we're trying to have such a rush to do this, because we've had a major error. And as Councillor Litz has mentioned, maybe in the future we will have to replace those when they start leaking. I guess I'm just wondering, you know, maybe in the future, yes, but why now? Why? We've been talking about this, I know, ever since 2002. And why do we have to have a rush now? Is there a reason why we have to rush this?
Sir, I don't believe the pavilion is asking to rush this project through. I believe we're taking adequate design and engineering time to replace these windows. One of the things that Councilor Litz did bring up is the infiltration of the elements, and I can tell you that that takes place today. I can move a piece of paper on probably 50% of those windows in any given day when it's windy outside. The elements already do come in.
Thank you both for being with us today, and I just want to say for the record that I continue to look forward to the day when there are windows totally throughout the pavilion, and we will, you know, this matter will pass too. I actually have made a few mistakes in my life also, and I assume I'll make a couple others, and I do think this is unfortunate, but I'm willing to move on. So thank you both for your being here. Yes.
Can I say something? Because I guess I'm concerned here about, we have a major mistake of $300,000, And there doesn't seem to be any consequences for anybody on this. It's kind of like we can make a mistake. Oh, we made a mistake, and we'll just go ahead. I guess that, on something like this, there should be consequences, and I think one of the consequences should be that we should delay this for 1 year to send a clear message that the City Council is not really very happy about this major mistake. It's not that we want to, persecute anybody or not, but what we want to do is we want to make sure we send a clear message that in the future, not just with the pavilion, but with also the other departments in the city government, we have to have accurate information. Because we had inaccurate information, and the vote was to go ahead and do these windows. If we had known that it was going to be more, maybe we would not have done this. So it's absolutely imperative that we always get accurate information.
Councilor Stagers, I very much respect Councilor Kavanaugh, go ahead.
Certainly, if you want to respond to that, that's fine, Madam Chair.
Okay, I would like to respond, but I didn't mean to interrupt you. I very much respect your opinion on this matter. I do believe accountability is very important in government and personally and every other way. Again, the mistake was made. I mean, their pavilion is extremely sorry about the mistake. I mean, if the City Council, if the majority of the City Council wants to delay the pavilion, I mean, it'll take, 5 votes, and that can be done. So I'm just saying that if that's the wishes of this body, obviously we have the power to do that. Councilor Kavanaugh.
Thank you. Consequences, I think in this situation, to me, the concept of consequences for a mistake being made, delaying the project might be a little severe in my opinion. That's cutting off your nose to spite your face. As you know, Councilor Staggers, I did not vote to put these windows in. I voted with you on that one. But the majority of this council did, and I have to live with that, and I think we need to go forward. I don't believe the consequence of delaying this for a year is I just think it's too severe. I'm more concerned about what both you and Councilor Jameson alluded to earlier, and that is why did we not hear about this? I think it's deplorable. If what we've been told about this meeting on February 8th is true, then why did it take over 2 months for us to find out about this? Now, the mayor made a big deal about this and drugged these two folks here, and the mayor's not here to defend what the administration did for 2 months by not telling the council. Communication is important. You're right, Dr. Staggers. I'd like to know what this administration did for 2 months before they told us about this.
Councilor Costello? Okay. Councilor Litz.
I'd like to put forth the idea that there are consequences to this, and that's the fact that the pavilion isn't going to get the windows done that they thought they were going to. I think that stands by itself as a consequence.
Councilor Staggers?
Well, I agree with Councilman Kavanaugh here that we should have known about this a lot sooner, because I've had some constituents tell me that, the information on this came out after the election. And the first time the city knows about it is February 8th, and then the election's April 8th, and then we find out several weeks after that. So there is that skepticism out there. And then also, as far as consequences go, I mean, I think it's just very important that we send a clear message as a city council to department heads, to other organizations that we support, that we have to have accurate information. And then just by saying, oh, well, they're not going to get all their windows this year. Well, that's true. They'll get them next year without any problem at all. That's not much of a consequence at all.
Okay. Councilor Costello?
Well, I guess the other consequence is that we could have $20,000 in additional electrical and heating bills, and probably another $20,000 in additional costs with inflation of products. So if we're looking for consequences, maybe it's $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 of consequences to the taxpayers of Sioux Falls to have to fund a delay. And we can have if you want to have the conversation on whether or not we should be doing the windows, that's fine. But, I mean, to delay it to punish the pavilion is ridiculous.
Well, who made the mistake?
But
who made the mistake?
Where is the punishment to the pavilion? I mean, you're punishing the citizens of Sioux Falls.
No. I think it's more important for us to send a clear message that we want accurate information. If we had had accurate information on this, we might not have had this issue this year, because we voted to speed this process up to put the windows in. And if we had known that it might have been 900,000, 800,000, or whatever, there might have been some other members on the council that might not have voted that way. They might have voted against speeding it up. So here we have an error being made that can have an impact on how we vote as a city council. We never want to have that situation. And we have to make it clear to everybody that deals with us, we want accurate information.
Okay, Councilor Kavanaugh?
I was in hopes that my question would elicit a response from someone in the audience. Is there anyone here from the administration to explain why we didn't find out about this for over 2 months?
If anyone wants to come forward to answer that, fine, and if not, we can get an answer directly from the mayor on Monday. Okay. All right. We will get that question answered, Kevin. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next item. Actually, I'm going to move to the update on the Lewis and Clark Water Project by Public Works.
Good afternoon, Kevin Smith with the Office of Public Works, here to present a brief overview of the executive summary to an interim water use agreement is Monty Walls with the Davenport Law Firm. They represent the Lewis and Clark Regional Water System, and maybe it's just a means of introduction. The City of Sioux Falls and Lewis and Clark have been actively engaged in discussions to find ways to ensure that construction can continue on the Lewis and Clark Regional Water System, that the needs of the City of Sioux Falls will be met, i.e. We will receive treated water by the year 2012, and just as importantly, that all the other members of Lewis and Clark have their needs met as soon as possible. Some of the things that Monty will brief you about are really contingent upon how future bid openings come out with Phase 1, 2, and ultimately Phase 3 of the water treatment plant, and more importantly on the level of federal funding that we receive in 2009 and years beyond. So there is a great amount of work that does need to be done by the system, including the design and bidding of these segments. Certainly there is work that needs to be done by staff, both from Lewis and Clark and the City of Sioux Falls and all other members, to continue to lobby for additional federal funds. It is likely that at some point the City of Sioux Falls may need to step forward with additional funding if that becomes necessary. But as I said earlier, we are working actively with Lewis and Clark on a solution, and with that I'll turn it over to Monty to explain what hopefully that solution is.
My name is Monty Walls. I'm an attorney with the Davenport Evans Law Firm here in town, and we are counsel to the Lewis and Clark Water Project. My assistant, Denise Jans, is handing out some supplementary information, including a copy of the PowerPoint that I'm presenting. There's also some facts and figures in terms of dollars that were developed between discussions with the city attorney, the city's outside legal counsel, Greg Greenfield, and the project engineers, Banner Associates, together with our firm. The first document I provided was one you may have seen last month, which is the current status of the Lewis and Clark project. And it's fair to say that this is no longer a dream or a concept. As you'll note, the main transmission line from the well fields in Vermilion all the way to Sioux Falls is constructed, with the exception of 10.4 miles, which will be bid next month and completed in about a year from that. And so consequently, the artery, if you will, of the system will connect the well fields all the way to Sioux Falls. There's going to be multiple connection points in Sioux Falls. The map shows you that branch, which is actually 85th Street, about half of which is already built, and the other half of which is under construction. And so the transmission line is well underway to completion. The history that brings us here is that when the water treatment plant was bid, the bids came in substantially higher than were expected, and with contingencies, the engineer's estimate prior to bid was about $108.3 million. The lowest apparent successful bid would have been at $142.4 million. So even with the contingency, there was a gap of about $34 million between the estimate and what the cost would have been had the bid been accepted. As a result, the cash is simply not there to build the water treatment plant in a single phase. The Lewis and Clark Board has already voted not to build it in a single phase and have approved moving forward conceptually with a three-phase approach, which is outlined in the materials. The first phase consists of construction of the pumps and pump station, basically the mechanism that will be about 6 miles north of Vermilion to get that water to the treatment plant, treated, and then pushed northward toward Sioux Falls. The pump phase of the project will begin construction in 2008, and so that is already moving forward. The Lewis and Clark Board of Directors has approved Phase 1, and bids are being received on Phase 1 shortly. Phase 2 is kind of the critical part of the project, and that will be the treatment plant itself, or at least the first phase of it. Instead of building 45 million gallons a day, which is the total that's going to be needed for the project, the approach is to build between 28 and 34 million gallons a day. Those are kind of key numbers for a couple reasons. 28 million gallons a day gives all the members other than Sioux Falls everything that they've subscribed for in their agreements. The 34 million gallons a day would therefore give Sioux Falls what its original subscription was, which is about 11 million gallons a day, plus another 6 million gallon surplus. So if we can get the treatment plant to 34 MGD, Sioux Falls would have about half of that, 17 MGD would be available to Sioux Falls during this interim period. The additional item is essentially some high-duty pumps, which are already part of Phase 1, and an additional filter. The total cost to get it from 28 to 34 is about $3.4 million, as outlined in your materials, and so there's a high priority on trying to get the initial phase, a 34 MGD plant. Phase 3 then is completing the plant to get it to 44.19 MGD, what we call 45 to round it up. And so the trick is, and one that involved 2 to 3 months of discussion with engineers, lawyers, and policymakers, is how do you get from the Phase 2 to Phase 3 in the most economic way possible with the least amount of damage to any of the members. So consequently, the purpose of the proposal was to put a bridge together between Phase 2 and Phase 3. As the Council knows, there's already been commitment agreements entered into with Sioux Falls and the 19 other members, which are the contracts that keep the membership together and on task. The ARCA, the commitment agreements, were premised upon there being a 45 MGD plant. And so we needed to build an interim use plan to get us from 34 MGD to 45 MGD in order for the commitment agreements to make sense and take full effect. So the concept, and actually the city was an advocate of this in the early discussions, was it's been called pay-as-you-go or build-as-you-need. It emphasizes getting members connected by members prepaying their dollars. The states have agreed to prepay their obligations, and that allows the water treatment plant to be built essentially with member and state dollars while we wait for the federal government to catch up with funding. Just a second. Phase 2 of the water treatment plant would be bid in 2009. That is critical because with prepayments, the funds need to be obligated to a particular contract, and 17 of the 20 members have agreed to prepay. And so you need a project to apply those dollars to in order to meet bond covenants. And so consequently, that treatment plant would be going up next year in order to meet the initial demands of the system. The original members would be 5 cities, inclusive of Sioux Falls, and they would receive 100% of what they had subscribed to, but until we're at 45 million gallons and everyone gets their full allotment, everyone agrees instead to just share water on an interim basis. The key to this plan working is Sioux Falls agreement, and I gave you this as a attachment because it's challenging to the vision, particularly mine. But the table that I provided you illustrates how the plan works, and the key is there's a highlighted line 23, and that shows the cumulative million gallons per day demands on the system. Sioux Falls is at 11.007 of that demand. The other members who come on in the first year are Harrisburg, Minnehaha County, South Lincoln Rural Water, and T. And so the system would need to produce, under this line, 15.1895 million gallons per day. That has to be compared with line 34, which is the effective capacity of the system. And the system would start out with 18 MGD capacity, while the water treatment plant would be at 34. Capacity is also based upon how many wells you have and what the wells are producing and your pump efficiency. And so it's the least of the 3 numbers between 31, 32, 33. The object of this projection is to always make sure that the system's capacity can meet the demands of additional members as they are added to the system. The first 10 members are pretty well locked in as to when they would be added. Their quantities are based upon their commitment agreements. The other members are projected out through the year 2020. Those may change based upon agreements among the members as to who goes first and emergency situations in terms of water delivery. Unlike Sioux Falls, a lot of the members will be entirely dependent upon the Lewis and Clark as their only source of treated water, and so those issues will need to be worked out. But relative to Sioux Falls, they're very small users, and so consequently we are able to implement a plan where these members are added over the course of time. The key adjustments in terms of supply are to add well capacity and to add pump capacity in 2014 and 2015, which allows the system to always stay ahead of the demands. Now, from Sioux Falls' perspective, a key ingredient that makes this plan work is that Sioux Falls agrees to defer its 28 million gallon demand and allow provision of water based upon its original 11 million gallons. As a about Sioux Falls, if you will, the surplus capacity of the system, which is line 35, goes to Sioux Falls on a first call or right of first refusal basis. And so when the system has extra capacity, it allows Sioux Falls the first option to purchase that additional water at the prevailing rate. If Sioux Falls elects not to take that water, other members can purchase it. The other incremental increase to Sioux Falls is this. Lewis and Clark, under the original proposal, only pays for the first 28 million gallons of well capacity. Sioux Falls has to pay for the next 17 million to get it up to 45 million gallons a day. The wells will be at 28 million gallons. The water treatment plant will be at 34 million gallons. So if Sioux Falls needs the additional water, it can build 6 million gallons of the well capacity and use that additional capacity at the water treatment plant. And so during the interim period, it gets, in effect, 11, that it's original ARCA plus surplus plus 6 million gallons if it chooses to build out some additional wells before the 45 MGD plant is online. The member prepayments are applied to both the member's share of the base system, which is the 28 MGD, and also to the member's share of the additional capacity. There was a concern by the city attorney that the Bureau of Reclamation clearly understand that simply because we have a 28 MGD plant, it doesn't mean that we're done building the system and take federal funding away. And so we've had a series of discussions, including a conference call last week with 3 of the reclamation officials, and we've sent a letter requesting confirmation consistent with that telephone call, acknowledging that reclamation understands that really the members are building their part of the system now. The federal government needs to catch up in that tail end of the system. The last phase 3 of the water treatment plant will be federal dollars and not additional member dollars. One of the suggestions actually made by Sioux Falls representatives was an interim true-up for the estimated additional cost of the 17 MGD in the water treatment plant. Basically, because the water treatment plant is going to cost more than was originally anticipated, all the members are going to have to pay more to get the water treatment plant. Sioux Falls would pay at the end of phase 2 when it will have completed payment for both its base system and its additional 17 MGD. Currently, Sioux Falls is already paying extra to upsize the pipeline, and you may recall the pipeline was originally 48 inches when Sioux Falls wanted to enhance its water supply. That expanded to 54 inches, and Sioux Falls agreed to pay for that additional cost, or that incremental cost, and that would be reconciled at the end of the project in 2020-something. Well, some good news, I guess, for the council is that the cost of the pipeline enhancement is substantially less than projected. Currently, Sioux Falls, on work and contracts let to date, would have a credit of about $4.3 million that the actual cost of the upsizing is less than the bid amounts. And so the proposal would be that while Sioux Falls will prepay for the water treatment plant to be upsized, it would get a credit for the pipe installation to the tune of the $4.3 million. The estimated cost to pay the additional 17 MGD in the treatment plant is $9.2 million. The credit for the pipe is estimated at $4.3 million, and that would leave a true-up in the vicinity of $4.9 million at the completion of Phase 2. And this is part of the facts and figures that I've outlined in excuse me, the correspondence to Mr. Greenfield. I note that there is a final true-up when everybody is done with the project, the feds are done, the members are done, everybody has laid the last foot of pipeline, then there'll be a final reconciliation to figure out that everybody has paid their corrected amount. And so there may be some true-up left to Sioux Falls at the end, but it will have addressed by far the lion's share of its prepayment obligations. The question then comes up as to a trigger event, and the time will come when Sioux Falls will want to have 28 MGD of water, and what if the project is still pending? The proposal that is in Table 1 that I gave you is based upon federal funding at $35 million a year. And that cash flows the project nicely. If Congress cuts back and goes to historic levels based upon the most recent history, the project will still cash flow as long as we defer construction of the T reservoir system. There are two large reservoirs in T that are not essential at this point in the project, and so by delaying those, it allows the project to cash flow with respect to building the water treatment plant. And so assume that we are at 2020 and Sioux Falls wants to have 45 MGD and it's not there yet. We've allotted a 3-year margin of error, so in the year 2023, Sioux Falls, if it's ready to complete its 17 MGD in well capacity, can call on the other members to meet the obligation to complete the system and build out the water treatment plant to 45 MGD. They would be given 2 years' notice in order to put the contracts out and get the bids let to finish off the system. And so the critical point from the perspective of the Sioux Falls City Attorney excuse me, is the need to have an end gate on this interim use, that at some point we're done, we're going to build the system out, and it's going to get taken care of so Sioux Falls gets its full allotment of water. Again, the federal dollars would be used to complete the base system. The preferred way of building out, and this only comes up if the federal government doesn't fund the project through completion, the preferred way would be to do it through a capital call on members. The board would also reserve discretion to look at rates. Rates are, however, dictated under the commitment agreement, and so there's already methodology in place that Sioux Falls has participated in designing that restricts and dictates how water rates are determined. If the base system is not completed, first of all, there are a series of options that if Lewis and Clark for some reason decides it does not want to finish the system, the members can finish the system with their own dollars, and the additional water belongs to the, or is used by those members. And so if there is a vote to stop building at the 36 MGD or some other number, and Sioux Falls paid to complete the system, all the additional water goes to he who pays to complete the system. Quite likely there'd be other members, particularly like a Harrisburg or a T, that would want to be included in that. If, however, no one ever wants to complete the system, which seems like a very remote possibility, there is a adjustment of how much water excuse me, each member gets, which is Table 2. And basically everybody shares and shares alike based upon how many dollars they put into the system. The status of this is the city and Lewis and Clark worked extensively and followed a number, of looking for Lewis and Clark water, but I guess and we actually explored a lot of possibilities that simply didn't work out for one or another reason. We believe we've arrived at the best solution for all 20 members, including Sioux Falls. We have presented this as a first reading, if you will, to the Lewis and Clark Board of Directors. They will be asked to look at the policy and potentially approve it as a plan at the May 1 meeting in Hull, Iowa. The plan to be effective, however, requires additional documents, including a memorandum of understanding between the city and Lewis and Clark, and a second amendment to the amended and restated commitment agreement between Sioux Falls and Lewis and Clark. And so no action is being requested of the council at this time. This is kind of the first reading or informational presentation of the plan, so you're aware of what is being worked on. Assuming that Lewis and Clark Board approves the plan, then we would be back with the memorandum of understanding and an amendment to the ARCA for council review. The looking for a particular in anticipation of the meeting, I did a little math, and lawyers doing math are dangerous. But in calculating this, and this is in the letter to Mr. Greenfield in the last Section 9, currently with indexed for inflation, the cost of this project is about $537 million. That's inclusive of Sioux Falls 17 MGD and its 11.007 MGD, and all of the bells and whistles that go with that. So the total cost to Sioux Falls is about $88.6 million, which is a staggering amount of money, but it represents 16.5% of the total cost of the project. When you work the numbers, Sioux Falls' share of the water from the project is 63% of the treated water. And so that kind of illustrates the impact of the federal funding on the project, and Sioux Falls has been able to leverage its dollars through the federal dollars, and so get 63% of the water for about 16.5% of the cost. So consequently, I think Sioux Falls has benefited. The other 19 members are benefited, and through a series of meetings with the city attorney, outside counsel, and the mayor, I think we've arrived at a plan that makes sense and meets Sioux Falls' needs while accommodating those of the other 19 members who are also voters and the board of directors. If there's any questions.
Councilor Staggers.
Yes. On your phase 2, you're mentioning that projected capacity of the water treatment plant is between 28 million gallons per day and 34 million gallons per day. Why do we have such a variation? Why don't we just say 34 million?
The 34 million is, it depends on how much cost you want to put into it. And if you want to spend the 3.4 million, you can get from 28 to 34 million gallons. And the reason that it's either 28 or 34, it's not a number in between, And the reason is that we were trying to keep the cash flow as down as possible to allow for the most flexible use of spending. But through the cash flow analysis, if we can get to our federal funding consistent with what it's getting now, we can still cash flow and build at the 34. And I would anticipate the board is going to want to build at the 34.
Also, you said the $28 million was for everybody except for Sioux Falls. Is that right?
That would be everybody in Sioux Falls at $11 million. If you add Sioux Falls additional $17 million, it goes from the 28 to the 45.
Okay, I guess maybe I didn't get that clearly. The $28 million.
It's what's called base capacity.
Right. So it includes us.
Correct.
With our $11 million.
Includes Sioux Falls with its $11 million. It includes all the other members at 100%. And see what happened was this. The original project was about 23.5 million gallons that the feds agreed to cooperate on. And then Sioux Falls and other members said, gee, we want to build it bigger. And so it went from 23.5 to 28. And so that incremental difference has to be paid for by members. One member dropped out, and Sioux Falls bought some of its water, and so there's been reallocations. But to redefine the base that Sioux Falls currently has is 11.007 million gallons a day. Mm-hmm. And they also said, long-term, we want this to be our long-term source of water, so we're going to add another 17 million gallons a day over and above the 11.007, which gets Sioux Falls to about 28 million gallons. And so that's when Sioux Falls agreed to the additional cost of upsizing the pipeline, upsizing the treatment plant, paying for about half of the T reservoir.
So the 34 million will include us with our original 11 million plus everybody else plus 6 million more for us? Is that basically?
34 would give you an extra 6 million.
Okay, I've got it now.
Yep.
Would there be any other questions for Mr. Waltz at this time? Councilor Staggers?
Yeah. In this whole process, I've always wondered about the possibility of a member buying the rest of the buying it out. Can we kind of?
I guess two responses.
Yes.
One is that the recent Newsweek time and all those is that the most precious commodity in the next century is not oil, it's water. Mm-hmm. And so I think the availability of water in terms of buying a member out will be pretty remote. The way it's been done before is that if a member drops out, the other members can come in and buy out that share based upon what their percentage would be of that amount. Sioux Falls obviously has the largest percentage based on its current formula. And so if a member were to drop out, there would be an offering to other members to take up that differential. The question's also been asked, can we add more members? And the answer is, under the current commitment agreements, we can't add more members because it's fully subscribed. Everyone that wanted to be on board should have been on board in about 1992, and we're so far down the process now, and we've expanded already twice, and the pipe's in the ground, and it's not possible to add members.
So once again, if I can just ask, there's been no real push by Sioux Falls to try to get some provision where we could have the option of just buying the whole system out in the future?
No, and there's nothing in the commitment agreements that would permit that to happen, and all of a bit of history, the original Lewis and Clark concept was actually opposed by the Bureau of Reclamation because of Sioux Falls' involvement. It was intended, according to the Bureau, to be a rural water project, and so your formula is skewed slightly against Sioux Falls, that other members are basically paying based upon 80% federal and Sioux Falls is paying half of the additional cost of adding Sioux Falls to the system, so it's really closer to a 50% contribution. And so consequently, it's a little bit, from a federal perspective, a disfavored system. Reclamation viewed it as a system that Sioux Falls could have built its own pipeline, and there was some pushback on using federal funds. And as I kind of illustrated in the last point, the federal funds really allow Sioux Falls to leverage its money pretty effectively to get to a large quantity of water for a very nominal price.
Thank you, Mr. Wells, for being with us today.
Dr. Staggers,
Yes.
the federal law is such that the water has to be owned by Lewis and Clark Rural Water System. So in order to get the federal money, Lewis and Clark has to own it. So the City of Sioux Falls and all the other members, no one owns that water. You own a contractual right to receive water so long as you make your payments. In the event that you ever own the water, the federal government wouldn't pay any money. There was a discussion when we originally negotiated the ARCA about some type of mechanism for purchasing somebody else's contractual rights, and that went nowhere. And one of the reasons, rightly or wrongly, is that it's the federal government that mandates that the system owns the water.
Because the concern I think that some of us have is that in the future, you know, after this is built, we're just going to have one vote out of, what, 19 on the board?
Yes.
So
that's why we try to negotiate and get as many of these questions answered now before the money goes in instead of starting in. The reason this came about was because the bid was too high, and now what are we going to do? And we've got this water, and if we're not going to use all the water, what are we going to do with it? And what's the end game for if the federal government doesn't come through? Those were all questions that weren't addressed in the ARCA. They were talked about but not addressed. But now it's become real, very real, and that's the purpose of the proposal, is to come up with what are we going to do in the meantime to make this work.
Would any of the rest of you have any other questions for Mr. Greenfield while he's here today? Thank you.
Thank you
for being with us. And Kevin Smith, do you have anything else for us on this topic today?
As Monty pointed out, this is going in front of the Board of Directors of Lewis and Clark this Thursday. That's why we felt it was appropriate to share this information with you today before we bring it forward for any further review and or approvals by the City Council. We still have to work on the MOU and also the second agreement to the amended and restated commitment agreement. So we have quite a bit of work that still needs to be done, and as always, we will continue to keep you in the loop as we move forward.
Thank you. I probably should call you Mr. Smith instead of Kevin, too. And thank you for your hard work on this project for so many years. We really do appreciate your expertise also. Okay, then at this point now we're going to go to the flood control topic, the flood control project, and I assume that Director Mark Cotter from Public Works is going to share some information with us today on the mayor's trip to D.C. and so forth.
Thank you, Chairman. Mark Cotter with the Office of Public Works. Did just want to give you a brief update today on what meetings were held last week with Mayor Munson, Kevin Smith, Mike Cooper, Tom Birkeland, and myself. We were also welcomely accompanied by Bill Mulligan, which is the Chief Directorate of Civil Works for the Omaha District. He reports to headquarters in D.C. and recommended that we go out there on two accounts: to raise awareness for the project, and in absence of sufficient federal funding this year in the administration's budgets, is there ways that we can raise the awareness that in ensuing years that we will have sufficient federal funds, and then thirdly, essentially tell them the predicament that we're in with FEMA's maps wanting to be updated, and our desire to get the project done with those conflicting timelines. So essentially, we had very good meetings with Senator Johnson and Senator Thune and Representative Herseth Sandlin. And then when we went to the headquarters with Bill Mulligan, sat down with the Chief of Civil Works for the U.S. and really talked to him about how do they rank projects, how do they prioritize projects, why in past years was this project funded, and then in this recent year it was lined out at 0, and then further, what can we do to get it higher on their priority list. And so he did a very good job of answering our questions. Essentially, you know, they still believe it's a very good project. They're committed to it. They understand that they've funded it in the past. He did say that they have not funded any new projects in the previous 3 years, and so the projects that have been funded previously are still on the list. Essentially, they've had budget reductions. They have a construction budget that's been reduced from $2.3 billion down to $1.4 billion, and their O&M budget to actually maintain their existing facilities has increased from $2.0 billion to up to $2.5 billion. And so they're, in many cases, doing what City of Sioux Falls is doing. We're putting more dollars into maintaining what we already have and being conscious on what level of benefit we get by adding new facilities. So in talking with them, we had said the way the City of Sioux Falls works, if we have a project that gets delayed, and be it right away or some design issue, is there a way that they, since they manage projects all over the U.S., is there a way that they can actually reallocate funds from that project over to Sioux Falls and then essentially make the commitment back to that project when the issue is resolved? And their comment to us was, is prior to 2006, they could do that. Legislation no longer allows them to do that if they intend to fund that project in the coming years, meaning that it's very difficult to be able to do that. Not like in Sioux Falls, where we do have a great deal of flexibility if we have a project that falls into some issues and we actually want to accelerate another. Our next question is how can we raise the importance and priority with the headquarters to make sure that in next year's budget, when they are looking at their needs, how can we raise the awareness? And he said exactly what we were doing, coming out, really explaining the impacts, talking about how many homes are going into the new FEMA floodplain with the new maps, how many assets are going into it. And so his comment to there was coming out there with Bill was very good. He got to see it firsthand, and we're certainly on his radar screen. The next question that's been talked about is if we were to find a way to advance funding to accelerate the project, would he support reimbursement to the City of Sioux Falls? And has immediately said yes. There's two different ways that can happen. They actually have a standard agreement, which we were not aware of before we got there. We've been working with our Omaha district, and our Omaha district chief directorate works in 10 states. They have not had to use that vehicle in the past, and so he wasn't familiar with it. But Gary Lowe was. He said we essentially have a standard document that you can use. It's called a PCA in government terms. That's a project coordination agreement. It just essentially allows us to get over this hurdle that we've had for the past few months, that the Corps can't just accept funds from the City of Sioux Falls. We've got to have a mechanism that allows them to accept that. The avenue that we were going for was to actually open up the authorization language and add language that says the City of Sioux Falls will qualify for reimbursement in the event they advance funds to the Corps. However, that still may be an option to raise our position with the project. But right now, essentially, there's two reasons we went out there: to raise awareness and then find a way to get the project done. We do think that we've found the vehicle, which is using a project coordination agreement. We got home late Thursday night. Omaha office is pulling that agreement out of the legal staff, and we'll review it, we'll get a copy of it, and then a number of activities will begin. So we could have a goal of having 2 significant construction years, 2009, 2010, update the maps in 2011, and actually have the area out of the floodplain. So that's essentially the short schedule to a fairly major project. $2,008 is in the low 30, about 32, 33 million. We expect with another year of inflation that the construction costs will approach mid-30s, but every year that we can advance the funding and hedge inflation will be to a benefit of Sioux Falls, and then clearly just to take all these properties out of the floodplain.
Councilor Mark, are you ready for questions?
I'll just give you a couple of our next steps in case you are curious what's on our plate next. We've already contacted the Omaha office, the project engineer, Lewis Upmore, if you've remembered him. We've asked him to select logical projects that this project could be phased into over 2009 and 2010. And so we'll hear from him very soon. We expect to go back to Omaha here in the next 2 weeks. Public Works and Planning will begin to work with Finance Office and start to look at bonding options for the advancement of funds. We would hopefully very soon be able to review this standard agreement, this project coordination agreement, and look at what that may entail. Once that, even though it's a very standard document, we expect the Secretary of the headquarters, it's going to take probably about a 3-month process to get that signed. And then last, we've procured easement on 19 out of 23 properties, and we will, our mission will be to now finish the procurement of those easements. So that's kind of what's in our recent time frame here to go for action steps, and I'll take any questions you might have.
Councilor Litz.
Mark, in the scenario that you mentioned where we would actually loan money to the federal government via the Corps, would they, and we're going to bond for it, would they pay the interest on the bond as well?
I don't believe that they will, but we'll get that question asked. I think we were under the understanding that if we were to open it with the authorization that it would only be the principal construction amount, but potentially this standard agreement addresses cost of time frame of money. So I will check on that.
Thank you, Mark.
Councilor Jameson.
Mark, if you were able to enter into one of those agreements, will FEMA delay their maps until the project is complete, or do they implement those as of October of this year?
We would hope that that would be the case. I think there is a time frame with FEMA that has, I think, slowed somewhat. They were expecting to run public announcements in January that would start a 90-day comment period. At the close of that 90-day comment period, City Council has 6 months to codify the maps, and to date that hasn't happened. I guess our hope would be is that we would structure a funding package in cooperation with the Army Corps of Engineers through this PCA, present that to them, and see what their feedback would be. And so we haven't. That'll be the next contact we make with FEMA, is once we actually structure a solid time frame for funding and for construction. I also want to add, there has been a great deal of work with the delegation, and the fact that the construction budget of the Corps has been reduced from $2.3 billion down to $1.4 billion. The headquarters expects there to be about $800+ million added back into their budget. And our senators and representative are very connected with those committees, and we still expect to see, with hope, some federal funding. And so this PCA document will be kind of an interim solution as we wait for these adds back in, which could be the first quarter of 2009 that we hear. but then also in years going forward, it'll also allow us to better work with the timeframes and the construction seasons that South Dakota has as we go through the federal process.
Councilor Staggers?
Yes, also in regard to the map situation with FEMA, has there been any discussion with our congressional delegation maybe trying to get an amendment in some bill to exempt the city for a couple years, maybe until 2011, so that, we just eliminate that possibility that, we're going to get stuck with these high insurance costs and so forth? Instead of focusing on money, just focusing on some little amendment in a bill.
We haven't asked for that exemption yet in that I'd have to see what their thoughts would be on weighing in on that.
Because it seems like it would be kind of a innocuous thing to do. And because when you talk about money, then people kind of get excited. But if you just talk about delaying here some maps.
I think Councilman Staggers, I think also that the absent of construction and federal funding, there's been statistical evidence that these flows will actually occur. And so I guess I would be hesitant to tell someone to not purchase flood insurance since two agencies have actually identified that these flows could statistically occur. And so I think it's in the city's, the most the city can do is work with the Corps and accelerate the construction as much as possible, and then also work with FEMA on the risk assessment.
Councilor Costello?
Mark, have we been able to quantify the dollar value of insurance that would have to be purchased by commercial or residential neighbor property owners?
I haven't seen a detailed study, but I have seen two rule of thumbs. There's essentially $750 million worth of assets that went into the new floodplain, and the estimate would be approximately $2 million worth of annual flood insurance premiums would be paid until this project gets done.
Any other questions for Mark today?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that update. We appreciate it. Okay, we're going to run through our committee reports as we always do. We'll start with the Audit Committee. Councilor Kavanaugh.
We're attempting to organize a meeting this week where the committee will be looking at a request for proposal to bid the external audit for the next few years. Other than that, I don't know of any further reports, internal audit reports that are done at this point. But obviously they're working on them that are in the program.
Thank you, Kevin. Fiscal Committee, Councilor Costello.
As part of the Fiscal Committee meeting next Monday, we have on the agenda to review the City Council's budget for 2009. And the idea was brought up before the meeting today that we have a light informational meeting next week. In fact, we have nothing on the agenda as far as I'm aware of. And I'd throw it out for discussion, is that if we want to have the whole council presented the City Council's budget instead of the Fiscal Committee, we could make that an option.
Okay. We do have no other items, and so that might be a good use of our informational time. Would you have any thoughts on that, the rest of you? I was able to visit with Pat, and Kevin came up with that idea right before a meeting, which I think is an excellent idea.
I'd certainly show up for something like that.
Okay. All right, why don't we just, yes, Councilor Kavanaugh?
Fiscal Committee has already seen this once, so we this would be kind of like a slightly modified or enhanced. More information, I believe, is what Clerk's Office is.
Why don't we just plan on that then at our informational on Monday?
With that in mind, then we will not have a Fiscal Committee meeting next week.
All right. And Councilor Costello, another topic I just wanted you to quickly mention to the group. I recently received an email from you with another very good question, as always, and it was regarding the utility rates proposals that will be coming forward as they do each year. Is that instead of us hearing the presentation about 4 times within a few days, that you suggested that we might want to just have that at the first reading, which I think is very logical, and I was wondering if that would be okay with the rest of you. Councilor Costello, would you like to address that better than what I just did?
Well, no, other than the fact that I think last year we heard the presentation in the committee, and then we heard it in informational, and then we heard it at first reading, and then we heard a brief version at second reading. So I'd propose that perhaps we just have a detailed presentation during the first reading.
Okay, would that be okay with everyone? Again, we're just trying to save hearing exactly the same information so many times. All right. Did you have anything else from the Fiscal Committee?
None.
All right. We'll move to Land Use. Councilor Jameson.
No report.
All right. Public Services Committee. Councilor Brown is gone for work reasons, other work reasons, I should say. But again, our committee will meet on May 12th at 3 p.m. instead of our regular time, 5 p.m. And so just know that we have a meeting coming up soon. Again, at our last meeting, we talked about water conservation, and also we are just reviewing very seriously the child care regulations that are on the books right now, and those are the only two topics that I'm aware of right now. Okay, I'm going to just jump to the finance report, the monthly finance report by Jean Groenhorst, please, and then we'll go to open discussion because we have quite a few little items there. Welcome, Jean.
Thank you. Jean Groenhorst, Director of Finance. You should all have a copy of the financial report, a hard copy. And this is the new format that we went over with the Fiscal Committee a while back now. The first couple of pages are really explanations of what is in the rest of the report in terms of the information there. We start out in the report on page 1 with the general fund, and probably the biggest thing, the first thing to keep in mind, this is as of March 31st. It's early in the year. There's not a lot to report, but there are a couple of highlights. Probably the biggest one in the general fund is if you look down about mid-page where it says bank franchise tax, and you go over to the right, you'll see the amount is $2,357,000. We had $975,000 in the budget. This is a carryover, as we understand it, from the State Department of Revenue from the issue we had last year, where we had one individual, or not individual, one apparently entity that had underpaid their taxes, and it's a similar transaction here, but we can't get any information out of what is really going on. But at any rate, it's good news for us by about $1.5 million, and but we should not be counting on this in 2009. That's the same thing we were told by the State Department of Revenue again. Other than that, there's nothing of any major significance that we noted in the general fund. When you go over to page 2, which is the second penny, that CIP money, the main thing I want to point out to you up on top, you'll see the $6,934,000. That's the amount of money that was appropriated out of the leftover $7.1 million that we had in the CIP. Otherwise, again, there's not much of any import that we can see at this point. When you flip over to page 3, again, one of the things that's very frustrating to us, you'll see that we are down, or we are at a 4.4% increase year over year, year to date. And if you recall, in February, we were at over 8%. So we're still getting the same gyrations from the state as far as the money coming in on the sales tax. And we still do not have an explanation for why that gyration continues to occur. We have no reason to think that we won't come in close to our budget number, which is at 7%. Because we did come in long again last year, I think we got to hit something in the area of 6.7 or something like that to actually get the dollars that we have in the budget. And then I'm not going to go through them individually, but there's these smaller funds are on pages 4 through 6, just a summary of those funds. And then starting on page 7 is the enterprise, the 5 enterprise funds that we have. And the thing we do with the enterprise funds that you want to pay most attention to is about a third of the way down. It says cash flows from operating activities. And you know, the first number there under lights is $314,000. That's year to date. Obviously, we want to generate an amount of cash flows that we will be able to meet our obligations with regard to capital improvements. When you work through this and get down to the bottom of the page where it's $1,404,000 under lights is the available cash that they have. So the thing we focus on with the enterprise funds is the cash positions, and that those cash positions are going to have enough money, like I say, in them to meet their obligations under the debt service programs. On page 8 is the CIP for 2008, the adjusted budget and the encumbered balances, and then the remaining balance there. But this tells you the CIP by the various departments and where the funding is coming from. So the first one up there, well, let's go to the second one. The second one is sales and use tax. That's all what we refer to as the second penny. Special assessment construction, when you go down a little further, that's primarily our assessments that we make for installation of water and sewer and things of that nature. So you can see what the CIP is doing by various MOU. When you go over to page 9, there is all of the detail behind the CIP. One of the things that we have implemented this year, if you see it going down the center of each page, there are some letters there, and there's a key to them down at the bottom of the page. And you'll see some of them they have an N in them, and they're grayed out. What that N indicates is nothing has been done yet on that project. And if you recall, in 07, we had an issue where there was a considerable amount of money that was left at the end of the year that nothing was ever done. That was never started. And we want to try and manage that situation a little bit better this year so that we don't have money in there that's essentially encumbered, but it never gets used. What that amounts to is we could have taken projects that were in an out year and move it up because the money didn't get spent, and essentially flip them around or something like that. So you'll be able to go down this and see which projects are not even started at this point. Plus, if you look at the index down below, there's other levels of completion and where they're at: design, construction, complete, contract signed. To give you a little better sense of what's going on with the CIP, and hopefully would raise some thought on where these projects are at.
Councilor Kavanaugh has a question.
Gene, just to follow up on the project status, if there's an N in front of these right now, what is the likelihood that anything will be done by the end of the year?
As we understand it at this point, this information comes from the engineering department. They actually key these as far as where they're at. At this point, we think there's a significant possibility that these will be started this year. They might get started later in the year than right now, but at this point, we're not overly concerned. When we get around to July, August time frame, and it's still sitting there with nothing being done on it, then you just want to start thinking that maybe this one's not going to get started this year, and then we should explore the possibility of switching it out for another project that's in an out year.
If the N's continue to be there in July, as you said, is that an appropriate time for someone, whether it's the council or the administration, to go to these people who manage these projects and say, what's going to happen here?
Well, I think it would be appropriate for the council to ask questions. Why it's not getting done? No question about that. That's why we put it in here, because you should be concerned about that you've appropriated money and for a project that you thought was appropriate, and it's not getting done. And you could have taken a project from an out year and moved it up there. Doesn't mean the one that's in here that's not getting done isn't going to be done for whatever reason, and there are a lot of reasons why they don't get done. I think a lot of them sometimes boil down to getting things like right-of-ways. And you might think you can get a project done, and apparently we'll run into a stone wall on a right-of-way situation, and we can't get it done. Well, then you should be starting to think about switching that to a project that you can apply the money to, and the one you're switching out up front, you just put the project back a year and use that money. So hopefully be a little more efficient on the usage.
Would it be premature for us to go to, and I'm not picking on any particular department, but let's just take Parks and Recreation. They have half a dozen or more that we see nothing started yet. Would it be appropriate if the council directed their staff to just say, okay, let's talk to the Parks Department, and these projects, could you give us a brief status report as to what you see happening between now and the end of the year?
I think it would be most appropriate to raise those kind of questions. We haven't figured out, now when I think about it, we really haven't figured out a good process short of having all the directors here. Now, most of them, a good share of the time, like Mr. Cotter will be here most of the time, and Mr. Kearney is here a lot. Those are obviously the two big ones as far as number of projects. We'll have to give that some thought. It's actually a process to come up and have you be able to ask questions about it. But certainly, if you want your staff or you want to call them, I think that would be most appropriate. That's why this information's here.
Councilor Kavanaugh, should we try to see if we get Mr. Carney to come here next Monday, or?
Well, I'm not sure we need to. I'm not sure we need to bring them in. I think there might be very legitimate reasons why these are not started, and in fact will be initiated and completed by the end of the year. That's all we're interested in. If there is a legitimate reason, fine. The basic thing, as Gene alluded to, is that if we can foresee that these funds will not be expended, we should be looking at what priorities we need to fund that weren't funded in 08.
Yes, I think that's an excellent point. Okay. Would you have any other questions at this point? I know that Gina's not finished, but any other questions so far? Okay.
And then the last page I want to draw to your attention is page 16, which is our debt situation. And just point out a couple of things to you under the go in the column authorized, not issued amount. These are projects that you have approved, and the documentation is all in place, but we haven't actually drawn down on the money yet. First one up on top is the $5 million, the urban renewal, the money that we received in a revolving loan agreement. That's the project in Pettigrew Heights. Nothing's been drawn down on that yet. And if you go about 3/5 of the way down the page in that column, you'll see $17 million. That's an SRF loan. Hasn't been drawn down yet, but that is for a filter upgrade out at the water plant. So I'm assuming that'll be coming down pretty quickly. And then down at the bottom, of course, the amount authorized but not yet issued is total was $50 million. We have authorized $282 million at this point. So the SRF loans continue to be a good deal at 2.5%, although with Federal Reserve rates and that nowadays, they're not as good a deal as they were 2-3 years ago, but they're still a good deal. So that's all the high points that I have of point out. Is there any other questions that I might try and answer?
Seeing no other questions, I'm going to move on to open discussion, and thank you very much for your update today. Very quickly under open discussion, just wanted to tell you that I really enjoyed sitting I don't know, I guess it's quite a long time with one of the 4 people on the reaccreditation team for the Fire Rescue Department. And it's just learn more about the process. And again, like I said, 4 came, but I was only interviewed by one person, and he was impressed that I took my standards of response coverage. And I told him, you all have this, and I didn't tell him that we carried around every day with this, but said, well, he was glad to see it. And then I told him about our survey results recently with Fire Rescue Department, and how highly they had rated in our survey. And actually, that was very interesting to him. In fact, he very much it reminded me by the end of the interview to encourage the Fire Rescue Department on their next compliance report to be sure to send all of that information about that survey and the fire rescue in their next report. And again, it's interesting to me that, when they have the accreditation, we are accredited, which you all know, but then the team comes in, every 5 years for reaccreditation. And the guy I was visiting with is a fireman from Ohio with lots of years and years of experience. And every time a team comes in, they send different people so that they have different eyes checking us out. And I thought it was a very interesting process. I appreciated being included in that interview. And then also I just wanted to just give you an update that the Whittier second annual Whittier cleanup was a wonderful success despite the very cold weather. And we were thankful that we didn't have snow and rain that day. But I just, can't thank Novak Sanitary Services enough for its incredible contribution. And again, this year, we're all a little smarter. We all think we are anyway. But this year, they brought in some of their best trucks that are compactors, or whatever you call them. But anyway, so man, they just ground up waste very, very quickly. And that was much more efficient than last year's system. And again, we were all just rookies at this last year. And then again, the South Dakota Multi-Housing Association, they were wonderful partners last year, but this year they were something else. They brought in, I think it was like 35, at least 35, and that's probably low, volunteers with all sorts of equipment, and I wish they would come and work at my house. They are really amazing. And Councilor Brown has a fun story to tell you about me, but I won't tell that story publicly. I'll let him. I'm glad he's gone today, so he can't tell it either. And Millennium Recycling with their electronic trailer, trailer for electronics, that was helpful also. And then again, at the end of the evening, just like end of the day, like last year, the banquet fed us, and that was a nice way to just all together kind of visit with each other. And then there will be a follow-up meeting on May 8th, Thursday, May 8th, just for us all, while these memories are fresh, to just decide what we can do better for next year. And that follow-up meeting will be at 7 p.m. at the Youth Barn, Eastside Lutheran, if any of you are available to come to that. And needless to say, the next year's event will be April 25th, 2009. And I can't imagine how good it will be by then. And then city employees, again, and just city cooperation throughout every department was phenomenal. And Russ Sorensen from the planning department was there at 6 a.m. It had to be about 22 degrees and worked all day long. And Director Mike Cooper was there for hours and hours and hours. And then I know I'll miss people, but Galen Huber for Public Works, Ed Verley from Landfill, and Tracy Amaskawet were true champions in the cause. But we just had wonderful help from everywhere. Now, how about some open item discussions from the rest of you? I'll probably think of a couple other things. Councilor Jameson.
I don't know, Mark, were you available to speak about Second Penny?
Would you want to kind of tell the council what, especially like
well, one of the things that there's been discussion about the Second Penny, and the mayor and I have had a number of discussions about it, and I asked him to have Mark come and give us a little pitch on the Second Penny.
Good evening again. Mark Cotter with the Office of Public Works. I would probably be here more tonight to receive some questions, and we can certainly add. Is there something in particular?
No, just basically that there will be a first reading next week on the 5th for the increasing the Second Penny to the full penny, and I think maybe the council might have some questions about that, and that's really why I asked you to be here. So
certainly, at least a snapshot back is that the Second Penny was started to be collected in this city in 1984, and that first year there was about $5.15 million through Second Penny that came in and used for capital projects. That dollar amount has changed greatly, as you know, and in 2004 it was streamlined back to .92. So for a long period of time it was at a full cent. And so since 2004 it's been streamlined back to 0.92, and some of the options that we've talked about in recent months and with the Alternative Financing Committee that began in February of 2007 was to identify a long-range solution that could put together a cost-share package with development and with the city to make sure we match the costs that we expect we'll see on the arterial streets. And so the package again was to put forth a new water distribution fee of $1,800 per acre, a two-tiered transportation fee that one of those was to be a blanket charge at acreage, regardless of land use, of $1,400 per acre, and then there was another charge that would be paid if you actually had frontage on the arterial. The combined revenue we expected to get from the transportation system fee was about $4.2 million, and so with the two water distribution and the transportation system fee, it would have been new platting fees that would generate about $6 million. Raising second penny in 2008 dollars would have brought in about $3.8 million. So it would have been a new revenue stream that could have been put toward safety, capacity, and development-driven projects of about $10.0 million. So that's the history. That is what's been talked about in recent months with alternative financing. I think one of the keys is that we're not essentially raising it. It is leveling it back off to what it was for many years in this city, and it's we believe, a good opportunity. Questions?
One of the other things I might want to mention, I believe there will be a companion resolution coming forth also, that money be dedicated toward what you're specifically referring to, so that we maintain some credibility with the development community and those folks, that we are in fact increasing our effort in those areas. Mm-hmm. And I think it'll be an interesting discussion.
Councilor Jameson, I just want to say that I really appreciate your leadership on this issue, and again, I realize that not every councilor shares your view on this topic, nor mine, but I do, for really some time, I've been lobbying individually a little bit on this behind the scenes, just to say that while this team is on board, we've really talked about this issue, I think almost since I went on the council, and that's been almost 6 years. We've had committee meetings on it and so forth, and so I look forward to the discussion. I very much respect other councilors who do not agree with me on this issue, and I look forward to voting up or down and moving on. So, any other thoughts? Councilor Stagers?
Yes, Mark, just to clarify those numbers, you said 4.2 million, 6 million, and 3.8, is that right?
The water distribution platting fee would, if we, again,
Mm-hmm.
we've got factors, which means that if we continue to plat on an average rate of 1,000 acres per
Mm-hmm.
year, the calculations are then based off, we would raise additional funds for water distribution on those large mains of $1.8 million. The transportation system fee would be approximately $4.2 million. And the reason there's an approximate is the piece of the fee that is paid by frontage property owners is different, whether it's residential or non-residential. And then last is that in 2008 we calculated that it would be approximately $3.8 million in second penny revenue. Now the next opportunity to enact this would be January 1st of 2009. You have 2 times a year to do that, July 1st and the 1st of the year. Prior to that, you have to give the Department of Revenue a 90-day window that you have gone through the council process to change the ordinance, and so that's the time frames as well.
And also, if I could just ask one more question.
Sure.
What percentage of the second penny are we actually using on streets this year?
This year, and we include debt service because we've got The $4.1 million that is dedicated to repaying the storm sewer bonds is about 65%.
65%. And how much of that would be the storm sewer bonds?
Well, Public Works' program this year is approximately $23 million plus $4 million worth of storm sewer bonds. And then, as you're well, that's outside of that number is also bond anticipation notes that we are doing to accelerate the construction projects that are not in that number, because that's essentially a bond anticipation note.
So just straight streets without sewers, how much? What percent, I guess?
I would, without a calculator, I would expect that it's close to 60%. I added the debt service in there as well, which is, I believe it's probably 58% of the plan this year is actual capital projects we'll build, and then if you add the debt service in, it raises it to about 65%. Okay?
Okay.
Does that help you, Councilman Staggers?
Well, I guess initially, I thought you said that included the sewers, the 65%. Did I misunderstand? Or?
The storm sewer, you're
Yes.
saying? 65% includes the debt service for the storm drainage projects, which again rehabilitated many streets in the core of Sioux Falls. Okay.
Sure, but also some of that was not just straight streets. You know, what I'm trying to get at, of course, is the promise that was made about the second penny in streets and things like that.
I guess I don't know your question, what you're asking me.
Well, 65%, you mentioned, includes the streets plus the sewer. Okay, but when you build the sewer, of course, you tear up the street and you do make street improvements. But also at the same time, you just have straight sewer. And so I just wanted the straight amount for streets, excluding, the money that's built just for straight sewer.
Engineering in 2008, I don't have my book with me, and so I will be, it's $23 million. And then if you go back up into debt service, there's an additional $4 million. And so if you take what will be expected to be generated in second penny, add those two numbers, and that will be the number. And I don't have my book with me tonight. I apologize for that.
Councilor Costello?
Mark, you said that we're raising the second penny up to a full penny to what it was when?
The original ordinance was brought forward in late '83, and it started to be collected at the beginning of '84.
Okay. So this will get us back to where we were in '84?
Well, from '84 to 2004.
To 2004.
Yep.
And then, are we removing the sales tax on food then?
We don't have that option. That's or maybe we don't have the authority to do that. But again, I guess on that question, I would just like to remind the listening audience that, again, under this scenario, a person would have to purchase $10,000 worth of food to pay $8 additional of sales tax. And I would also like to remind the world that the City of Sioux Falls spends lots of money on very, very worthwhile projects for people who are not as blessed as I am. And I think at some point we'll probably bring out that long list. Would you have anything else, Councilor Costello and friend? Councilor Jamieson.
Just one other comment. If you read through that survey that was done, streets were the lowest, and next to it was drainage was the lowest. And these are areas I think that we need to make sure we address in the future.
Any other questions or comments on this topic at this point? Okay, we'll just continue on that effort. And Councilor Jamieson, do you have anything else you'd like to share about next Monday?
One other item.
Okay.
I think everyone received an email from Jennifer outlining the 5-year staffing program and an executive order addressing that staffing program. And I will be proposing that the ratios for police and fire be eliminated, and that will be first reading next Monday also.
Thank you, Councilor Jameson. I realize that's a fairly controversial topic also, but I think it's one that we have discussed at great length, so I am pleased that we are going to vote that up or down and move on also. Councilor Costello?
Does anybody have a copy of the original ordinance of that, and can they email it to me if they do? Okay.
Sure, the office will be happy to do that. Okay. Would there be any other questions or comments on that topic this time? Okay. Would you have any other open item discussions? I know we've been here a long time already. Any other open item discussions for today before we adjourn? Okay. All right. Seeing none, I think we will just call this adjourn the meeting for today, April 28th already, and we will see you next Monday at the informational. Thank you all for your work for our city.